Find a comfortable position. Allow your body to settle into its weight. Let the day loosen its hold on your thoughts. There is nowhere you need to go tonight and nothing you need to solve. Only the quiet rhythm of breathing and a story that moves slowly through calm places. When you are ready, we begin. Tonight's story is called The Keeper of the Floating Seed Vault. Far above the sleeping curve of the Earth, a station moves through orbital night. From the world below, it would appear no larger than a wandering point of light, crossing the dark in silence. But here, within its quiet structure, it is broad and deliberate, built in long circular layers that turn softly through the stars. At its center rests the seed vault. For a little while, nothing asks to happen. The station keeps moving, but so gradually that movement becomes another form of stillness. Its long circular layers turn with the same patience that shapes everything here. No sudden noise, no jolting change. Only the muted certainty of orbit repeating its path around the world below. If you wish, you can let your own breathing fall into that same pace now. Slow in, slow out. No need to make it deeper. No need to change it on purpose. Only notice that it is there. The station glides through darkness while the earth turns beneath it. Far below, weather systems drift over the planet in immense pale curves. Clouds spread across the oceans in long bands that seem almost painted from this height. Some are thin enough to show dark water through them. Others gather in denser swirls above the sleeping continents. Now and then the moonlight catches one high edge and leaves a silver trace across it before slipping away again. Nothing in that wide view is hurried. Not the turning of the world, not the drift of cloud, not the passing of the station overhead. This is a place built against rushing, a place where care is counted in small repeated actions, a checked seal, a cleared pane, a folded cloth, a steady hand returning each thing to its place. Even the light is arranged for calm. Cooler guidance lines near the floor, softer panels at each junction, doors that open without haste, instruments that answer in measured tones rather than sharp alarms. Everything within the station seems designed to support long attention without strain. You continue through that atmosphere now, lantern in hand, moving toward the vault at the center. And if the mind wanders for a moment, that is all right. The station continues, the orbit continues, the night continues. There is no need to hold every image tightly. The journey will keep unfolding, one chamber after another, one small act of keeping after another. Above the hull, the stars remain clear and hard in the dark. Below it, the curve of the world keeps turning. And between those two immensities, the station carries its quieter cargo: dry seeds, sleeping futures, small stored beginnings held against loss. That is enough to know for now. The rest can arrive over time. Beyond the outer hull, the night side of the planet stretches wide beneath the station. Oceans lie dark and deep. Cloud systems drift over continents in pale silver bands where moonlight touches their upper edges. Along one distant coastline, a scattering of city lights glows faintly before curving away into darkness. Inside the station, the night cycle is already underway. The brighter working lights have dimmed. The corridors now carry only their quieter illumination, low guidance lines along the floor, muted wall panels at each turning, the occasional soft console glow. The busy movement of the day has passed. Only a few caretakers remain awake through these long orbital hours. One of them is walking the docking corridor now, the keeper of the floating seed vault. Your steps fall lightly across the metal floor panels. In one hand, you carry a small inspection lantern. Its warm light is not necessary, not really. The station's navigation lines are enough to guide your way, but the lantern belongs to the shift, and has for so long that it feels as natural as the badge at your wrist or the folded cloth in your pocket. In a place shaped by glass, metal, and cool blue light, That small amber circle changes everything close around it. Ahead, the corridor widens beside a large observation window. You slow there for a moment. The earth turns far below, so slowly that it almost seems still. A pale sweep of cloud stretches across a dark ocean. Beyond it, the faint glow of a sleeping city spreads softly against the curve of the planet. Above the station, the stars remain sharp and clear, undisturbed by atmosphere, constant in the endless dark. The lantern rests easily in your hand. Then, after this brief pause, you continue on. At the far end of the corridor stands a reinforced door set into the wall, tall and smooth, its metal surface unbroken except for the small control panel beside it. The entrance to the seed vault. You set the lantern on a narrow ledge and place your hand against the panel. A soft tone answers. Light passes quietly across the surface as the station recognizes the beginning of the night inspection. Inside these walls rest thousands of seed collections, grains from ancient farms, seeds from forests, orchards, and gardens, dry capsules gathered from distant worlds where unfamiliar plants first rooted beneath unfamiliar skies, all of them stored here against loss, against accident, against time. The scan completes. A green light appears. Somewhere within the sealed frame, hidden mechanisms shift. The lock releases. You lift the lantern again and rest your free hand for a moment against the cool metal as the door slides open. A corridor stretches beyond it, long and pale, lined on both sides with preservation chambers. Behind thick glass panels rest row upon row of sealed capsules, each one holding seeds that may one day grow again. The air inside is cooler, not harshly cold, only measured, clean, the kind of stillness that belongs to places designed for patience. You step through the doorway. Behind you, the vault door closes with a soft final click, and the muted sounds of the outer station fall away. Here, the night shift truly begins. The lantern light moves over the floor as you walk farther into the preservation corridor. Chambers line both walls in long, ordered rows, their glass catching faint amber reflections as you pass. Within them, thousands of small cylinders rest in careful arrangement, each labeled with a narrow engraved band. Species name, place of origin, date of preservation. Names, origins, years, a silent archive of beginnings. You move unhurriedly along the first section of the corridor, letting the lantern light settle where it will. In one chamber, frost has gathered along the lower edge of the glass. It always forms first in places like this, where the cooling systems hold the chamber at exactly the temperature long storage requires. You stop there and place the lantern into its wall bracket. From your pocket, you take the soft inspection cloth, folded neatly from habit, and wipe the frost away with one unhurried motion. The glass clears at once. Inside, rows of pale golden grains rest within their capsules. Ancient wheat, preserved from fields that once grew beneath warm sunlight on Earth, long before they came to rest here in orbit. The grains are small, dry, and intact, held in perfect stillness behind the glass. Once they moved in open wind, once they ripened under weather and season. Now they wait in quiet suspension, kept safe for a future no one needs to hurry. You fold the cloth and slip it back into your pocket. The frost will return. It is meant to. The chamber will remain cold, the corridor slightly warmer, and the glass between them will always show that difference. But for now, the view is clear, and that is enough. The lantern's glow rests softly against the glass. The wheat remains still behind it, and around you, in the cool hush of the preservation corridor, the seeds of many worlds lie quietly in your care. For a few moments, you remain there beside the cleared glass. The lantern hangs in its bracket. The chamber holds its cold. The corridor keeps its measured silence. This first pause has its own kind of importance, not because anything is wrong, not because anything needs correction beyond what you have already done, only because every night round begins with a settling into the pace of the vault, and that settling cannot be hurried. You have entered the colder air. You have touched the cloth to the frosted pane and seen the preserved grains behind it. That is enough for the mind to begin letting go of the brighter, busier rhythm of the outer station. Here, everything narrows with care into attention. The curve of the glass beneath the cloth, the low hum behind the wall, the faint warmth of the lantern near your hand, the cooler air against your face, the pause of the seeds themselves. No movement, no demand, only waiting. If you like, you can let your body follow that same cue now. Shoulders loose, jaw unclenched, hands at rest. Nothing in this corridor asks for tension. The wheat behind the glass once belonged to weather and soil and season. It once rose in open air, in long, bright fields where wind moved across the heads of grain and sunlight warmed the ground beneath. There would have been days of heat, evenings of cooler air, the sound of stalks brushing one another, the gradual ripening from green to gold. All of that has been distilled now into this untroubled form, not lost, only held. The field is absent, but its memory remains in the seed. The whole shape of a future harvest rests inside these small, still grains and asks for nothing tonight except the right temperature, the right dryness, the right protection. The vault understands this. So does the keeper. That is why the work is so calm, not because it is unimportant, but because it is important enough to be done without waste, without drama, without anything harsh enough to disturb what is sleeping. You lift your gaze from the wheat and let it move along the line of the corridor. More chambers wait beyond this one. More names, more places, more preserved beginnings. The lantern's light touches the next pane, then the next. Amber on glass, amber on metal, then shadow again. The pattern is simple enough that the mind can follow it without effort. Walk, pause, look, check, continue. The body settles inside it naturally. And as the night round truly begins, the corridor no longer feels merely cold or undisturbed. It feels trustworthy. A place where each thing remains where it should be. A place where futures are stored carefully enough that they may sleep without fear. Only after that moment of settling do you reach again for the cloth and prepare to continue deeper into the vault. You finish wiping the glass and fold the cloth into its familiar square before returning it to your pocket. By later in the shift, frost will have gathered there again. The chamber will remain cold, the corridor a little less so, and the glass between them will keep recording that measured exchange. But for now, the view is clear. You lift the lantern and continue down the corridor. The preservation systems move through the walls in a sound, so low it is almost part of the silence. Coolant lines, temperature regulators, air circulation measured carefully enough to keep thousands of sleeping seeds unchanged through years and then through decades more. The chambers pass one by one. Some hold grains. Some hold fruit seeds, tree seeds, vine seeds, flowering species from Earth and from colony settlements far beyond it. Labels gleam briefly as the lantern moves over them. Here a tray of orchard stock from old temperate valleys. Here a bank of dry forest seed from mountain regions. Here a row of narrow capsules sent back from a distant plain where pale grasses grow beneath two small suns. You stop there. The capsules are long and slender, each one holding seeds, so light they seem almost spun rather than grown. Their pale surfaces catch the lantern glow with a faint silver sheen. Beside the chamber, the temperature gauge shines in an untroubled line of green. No fluctuation, no drift, only the even steadiness the vault is built to maintain. You linger for a moment, then move on. Farther ahead, the corridor widens into a control alcove set into the curve of the wall. A low console follows the line of the preservation ring, its surface lit by soft instrument panels and a row of waiting indicators. This is one of the first stations checked on every night round. You set the lantern down on the console's edge. Its amber light settles across the metal, warming the cool instrument glow. Then you touch the verification strip, and the system begins its sequence. Across the display, the station answers section by section. Preservation chambers, secure. Cryogenic rings, secure. Archive corridors, secure. Hydroponic nursery, active. The indicators move in a composed procession, one after another, until the final signal appears and a soft tone marks the end of the check. You add the inspection time to the digital log. Nothing more is needed, no long remark. Only the mark that says the round has begun, and the vault has answered as it should. When you lift the lantern again, the path ahead feels more settled somehow, as though the corridor has acknowledged your presence in return. Beyond this first section lie the older chambers, then the deeper archive, and after that the living parts of the station where stored possibility becomes leaf, stem, flower, and seed once more. You leave the alcove behind and follow the preservation corridor as it curves inward. The air cools by a degree. It is slight but noticeable. The kind of difference the body understands before the mind gives it a name. Here, the oldest collections are kept. The cooling systems work a little harder. The corridor bends around the station's inner structure, and the chambers become fewer but larger, built with heavier glass and deeper seals. Then the lantern reaches a door set slightly apart from the wall. A silver plaque is fixed beside it. The deep archive, you step closer. Behind the reinforced glass stand tall storage racks arranged in long, careful lines. Frost lies lightly over the inner surfaces, thin enough that the shapes beyond it are suggested more than seen. These are among the oldest preserved collections aboard the station, gathered in the early years of off-world expansion, when every new colony sent back its first viable seed stock to be cataloged, protected, and remembered. You touch the inspection control. A narrow viewing strip clears through the frost. The glass brightens slightly, and the nearest rows come into focus. Dark grains from old forest species on Earth, dry pods from early lunar agricultural domes, spiral seeds from climbing flowering vines found on a world where the daylight arrives softer, and the pull beneath growing roots is lighter than at home. The lantern remains low in your hand while you look. Nothing moves behind the glass. Nothing needs to. The stillness here is the whole point. These seeds may not be planted for centuries. Some may never be planted at all. Yet they remain, held in readiness, carrying whole landscapes inside their quiet shapes. After a time, the cleared strip begins to mist at the edges again. The chamber is returning to itself. You enter the status check on the small panel beside the door. Secure, no variance, deep archive holding steady. Then you turn back to the corridor, where the preservation ring continues in a pale curve ahead, leading farther into the silent heart of the floating seed vault. Ahead, the preservation ring curves farther around the station's inner structure, guiding you toward the sections where the archive becomes more active, more often handled, though no less carefully kept. After a short distance, the corridor opens into a broader chamber lined with tall cabinets built from floor to ceiling. These are not the deep long sleep collections you inspected earlier. This is the working archive, where researchers and botanists access selected seed stock for study, comparison, and renewal. You slow at the first cabinet. A long recessed handle runs across the front of a shallow drawer. You set the lantern on the ledge beside it and ease the drawer open. It glides outward without sound. Inside, hundreds of small glass capsules rest in exact rows, each one no longer than a finger, each sealed with a fine metal band etched in tiny lettering. You lift one from its place and turn it with care in the lantern light. The glass is cool and smooth. Inside lies a small cluster of pale seeds, each shaped like a tiny teardrop. The engraved label reads, Lunar Valley P Earth Colony Archive. These were gathered from one of the earliest agricultural settlements in the moon's sheltered interior valleys, where soil beds were built beneath rock and sealed glass, and generations of growers learned which crops would adapt to low gravity and patient care. The peas were one of those successes, strong enough to climb, reliable enough to harvest, important enough to preserve. You turn the capsule once, checking the seal and the clarity of the glass. Then you return it to its place. Around it rest seeds from desert shrubs adapted to dry colony domes, seeds from floating river gardens in orbital habitats, seeds from forest plants that grow beneath redder light than any Earth sky has ever known. Small capsules, waiting only for the right conditions to begin again. You close the drawer. The cabinet seals softly, and the archive returns to stillness. You leave your hand resting on the closed drawer for a moment. The metal is cool beneath your palm, but less cold than the deep chambers behind you. This section of the vault is not made for centuries of untouched sleep. It is made for careful return, careful opening, careful study. The seeds here still rest, but they rest closer to use. In the deep archive, the stillness is absolute. Here, it is a stillness shaped around eventual hands. In brighter hours, researchers will open selected drawers. Comparisons will be made, records will be checked, samples renewed. A seed might be removed not for permanent planting, but for examination, viability testing, or repropagation before being returned again to the chain of keeping. The cabinet before you has known that pattern many times. Open, select, examine, record, return, and each time the order has remained. There is something deeply reassuring in that, not because it is grand, but because it is reliable. A drawer that opens smoothly. A capsule that fits exactly back into its place. Labels that still match the records. Records that still match the sealed contents. All those small agreements held across years. You can feel the history of that order even in the quiet mechanics of the cabinet itself. The drawer does not stick. The handle does not resist. The seals close cleanly. Nothing jars, nothing snags. The whole archive has been maintained so patiently that function has almost become elegance. Your lantern light moves across the cabinet fronts nearby. Each one carries its own small world of waiting. Some drawers hold seeds from dry habitats where roots must learn to drink sparingly. Some hold aquatic hedge plants adapted for floating beds and narrow channels. Some hold orchard stock from colony settlements where fruiting trees were taught to grow under domes of filtered light rather than open weather. Some hold renewed lines derived from much older Earth varieties, kept alive not because they are the most efficient, but because continuity itself has value. That may be one of the vault's quietest truths. Not every seed here is stored because it will certainly be needed. Some are kept because possibility is wider than prediction, because no one living now can know which climate, which colony, which unforeseen future may once again require a trait carried undisturbed inside a small dry seed. So the archive keeps more than what is immediately useful. It keeps variety, memory, alternatives. Just as the peas in the capsule were shaped by low-gravity valleys beneath lunar stone, so too were countless other lines shaped by their own places. Redder suns, longer seasons, colder domes, wetter air, thinner soils, different day lengths, different ways of beginning. The station does not rank those histories. It holds them, one after another, drawer after drawer, year after year. Even in night mode, the working archive carries a faint sense of human continuity. Someone selected these lines, someone logged them, someone sealed them. Someone opened them again in another year, checked their viability, and placed them back. Someone will do so again after you. The keeper's role belongs to that same long chain, not dramatic, not solitary, simply continuous. You lift the lantern and let its glow travel once more across the cabinet fronts. Then, when the moment feels complete, you move on toward the older collections waiting farther along the curve of the room. At the next cabinet, the collections are older. You pull open another drawer and find a row of crystal cylinders filled with grains that once moved in open wind across Earth long before any of them were carried beyond it. You lift one carefully. Wheat, nothing exotic, nothing rare in appearance, only a cluster of small golden grains, dry and perfectly held within the sealed cylinder. Yet few seeds have traveled farther in human company. These come from stock preserved during the earliest global archive efforts, gathered from regions where wheat had been grown for centuries upon centuries before spacefaring began. Fields under weather, soil warmed by sun, harvests cut by hand, then by machine, then remembered in records, then reduced to small sealed futures like this one. You hold the cylinder and the lantern glow a moment longer. Beside it, other grains wait in their own rows: barley, millet, rice, familiar names carried carefully through time. You return the wheat to its place and slide the drawer shut. Then you lift the lantern again and continue deeper into the station. The cabinets follow the curve of the inner ring for a while longer, then gradually give way to another section of the vault where the preservation chambers rise taller, built into the walls as vertical cylinders. These are meant for collections that require colder and more exact conditions. The air changes as you enter. Cleaner, sharper, a degree colder again. Faint mist gathers near the lower edges of the glass. You stop beside one cylinder and rest the lantern on its inspection shelf. Frost has formed along the outer edge of the viewing panel, thin and white against the dark of the chamber beyond. From your belt pouch, you take the cloth again and clear the glass with slow, even movements. The view opens. Inside, rows of sealed capsules stand in narrow racks. These collections come from colder colony regions, from plants adapted to long winters, weaker light, and seasons stretched thin across distant orbits. The preservation chamber holds them in conditions close to those from which they came. You glance at the gauge beside the panel: temperature holding, humidity holding, no variation. For a moment, you watch the green line of the readout remain unbroken. Then you fold the cloth and return it to its place. Frost will gather again, as it always does. The chamber will keep its cold. The glass will keep recording the difference. But the inspection is done, and the view is clear enough for now. You lift the lantern once more. Farther ahead, the colder storage gives way at last to the first threshold of the living sections, where preserved potential becomes stem and leaf beneath carefully shaped light. You lift the lantern from the inspection shelf and continue on. The corridor curves ahead in a pale, quiet arc. As you follow it, the character of the vault begins to change again. The colder preservation cylinders fall behind one by one, and with each step, the air loses a little of its sharpness. Not warmth exactly at first, only less cold. A softer current moving through the passage, a gentler atmosphere waiting farther in. Soon the hush of long storage will give way to something living. You can sense it before you see it. The faintest trace of green in the air, a hint of moisture, the subtle difference between a place where life is sleeping and a place where life is actively growing. The lantern swings lightly beside you. Its warm glow moves over the floor panels as the corridor leads toward a reinforced doorway set into the curve of the wall. A small access panel glows beside it. You rest the lantern on the nearby ledge and hold your wrist near the reader. A muted tone answers. The seal releases and the door slides easily aside. Beyond it lies the hydroponic nursery. You lift the lantern again and step through. At once, the atmosphere changes. The air is warmer here, though still gentle and controlled. Above the growing beds, plant lamps cast a soft wash of green and gold across the chamber. Their light is different from the cool corridor glow behind you. Broader, lower, meant not for navigation, but for growth. Rows of shallow trays rest within stabilized frames, each one held level in the station's mild artificial gravity. Within them, young plants are rising. Some have only just broken the surface. Some are no more than paired leaves on slender stems. Others have already begun their patient upward reach toward the lamps above. The air carries a faint, fresh scent, damp root beds, green stems, water moving at its own pace through enclosed channels. After the cold resting of the preservation halls, the nursery feels almost like another season. You move along the first row. The lantern light blends with the plant lamps overhead, amber meeting green. Tiny droplets cling to the leaves of the nearest seedlings, catching the light before slipping back into the dark growing medium below. A narrow irrigation strip runs beside the tray. You crouch slightly, touch the control, and open the flow by a fraction. Clear water begins to move along the channel, not quickly, only enough. A thin, regular current passes through the root line, darkening the growing bed as it goes. You watch until the movement settles into an even rhythm. Then you close the panel again and stand. Nothing here asks for haste. You let that truth remain for a moment, not only in the tray before you, but in the whole chamber. The seedlings do not force themselves upward. The water does not rush the roots. The lamps do not blaze. Everything in the nursery is calibrated towards secure becoming. That makes the room feel kind, not soft in a weak sense. Precise, certainly. Measured, certainly. But kind in the way a well-made environment can be kind, giving each living thing what it needs without excess, without harshness, without strain. The body notices such places. It settles in them almost by instinct. You continue between the trays. A circulation system moves the air leisurely through the chamber, enough to keep the stems from growing too still, enough to give the leaves a faint responsive tremor beneath the lamps. Along one bed, the seedlings are still at their first opening. Along another, pale stems have already lengthened toward the support frames above. The nursery is full of beginnings, each one at a slightly different point in its cycle. You stop beside a tray where a young vine has drifted from its guide. In the station's lighter gravity, stems sometimes wander before their tendrils find the path intended for them. You set the lantern on the edge of the frame and reach gently toward the vine. It is light beneath your fingers, flexible and cool, its growing tip still searching. Unhurriedly, you guide it back toward the fine support wire above the bed. The moment the tendril touches it, the plant responds, not all at once, only with that small, natural certainty living things sometimes have. The curling tip begins to wind around the guide, delicate and unhurried, taking hold where it was meant to climb. You leave it there and glance at the tag fixed to the tray. A flowering vine from a distant world where sunlight arrives softer and seasons stretch long beyond any familiar earth pattern. Here in the vault, the lamps have been tuned to that gentler spectrum. The plant has accepted it, adapted to it, continued. You lift the lantern again. The vine remains lightly coiled around its support, its path corrected with almost no trace of intervention. Around you, leaves hold stillness and motion at once. A slow drift, a slow reach, the settled work of growth. Farther in, the nursery begins to change. The trays grow deeper. The stems grow taller. Buds appear among the leaves. Above, the plant lamps shift through subtle bands designed to mimic a lengthened rise and fall of day. The chamber widens almost without announcing it, and the scent in the air grows richer now. Damp soil, green leaves, the faint early sweetness of things beginning to flower. You pause beside one of the taller beds. Long stems rise from the growing medium. their narrow leaves spreading beneath the lights. Along the upper branches, small buds have begun to form, still closed, still gathering themselves. You set the lantern down and study the nearby control panel. Water balance, nutrient flow, light spectrum, all within range. Still, part of the keeper's work is not only to check, but to shape. You reach for the light control and turn it slightly. Above the tray, the lamp warms by a small degree. The color shifts almost imperceptibly, but enough to encourage a slower opening in the buds during the station's night cycle. The leaves catch the altered light at once. Their green deepens, their surfaces hold the glow more softly. For a few moments, you remain there watching. Nothing dramatic happens, nothing needs to. The stems adjust by the smallest measure, angling almost invisibly toward the new balance overhead. It is enough. You return the dial to rest and lift the lantern again. Then you continue along the path as the hydroponic nursery carries you deeper into the living heart of the floating seed vault. Ahead, the hydroponic chamber begins to widen. The ceiling lifts higher above the trays. The path opens, and through a curved glass doorway at the far end of the chamber, a softer, deeper glow becomes visible. Beyond it lies the living archive garden, not the nursery now, but the next stage. A quieter, fuller place where mature plants are grown not only for observation, but for the seeds they will one day yield. Above the glass, the station opens briefly to the stars, and their slow drift can be seen between the lines of the dome. You continue toward it at an unhurried pace. Around you, the growing beds begin to change. The neat succession of nursery trays gives way to a more varied section of the vault, where the plants are older, stranger, and less uniform in their habits. Some are familiar at once, herbs carried outward from Earth, flowering species that followed human settlement from world to world, food plants adapted patiently to domes, valleys, and orbital habitats. But farther along, the forms become less familiar. Leaves broaden. Some stems rise in tender spirals. Others spread low across the surface of their beds, laying down pale green and silver patterns beneath the lamps. This section holds species first gathered on distant worlds, carried back by exploration crews over many decades, and studied here until the station learned what kind of light, moisture, gravity, and rest each one required. You stop beside one of the trays and set the lantern carefully along its frame. Within the bed grows a cluster of slender plants with narrow, translucent leaves. They do not reflect the lamp glow the way Earth leaves do. Instead, they receive it, hold it, and let part of it pass through. Each blade becomes faintly luminous, as though lit from within. You lean a little closer. Fine veins run through the leaves in delicate branching lines, carrying moisture and nutrients through the plant's thin structure. A small tag beside the tray records its origin, a forest world orbiting a dim red star, where light arrives softer and weaker, and where plants evolve to gather every possible trace of it. Here, the growth lamps have been tuned to match that spectrum. The species has adapted. You glance at the moisture gauge set into the tray. The reading remains dependable, no correction needed, only confirmation. You lift the lantern again and continue on. Beyond that bed, the chamber holds stranger shapes still. Spiral stems turning toward the lamps in slow, deliberate arcs. Delicate branching tendrils drifting lightly in the station's mild gravity before settling against their supports. Nothing rushed, nothing careless. Each species held in study and in trust until its seeds can join the sleeping archive beyond. Ahead, the corridor bends toward another section of the station where the pull beneath your feet changes slightly. You feel it before you fully see it. The entrance to the rotation ring stands open ahead, a wide circular passage where the station provides a little more gravity for plants that root and rise more naturally under a stronger downward pull. You step inside. The difference is subtle but immediate. The air feels a touch denser, your footing more settled. Here, the plants respond with a kind of measured certainty. Roots hold more firmly. Stems rise more cleanly. Growth follows a slightly more familiar line. You walk the curve of the ring without hurrying. Tall grasses move faintly beneath the lamps. Broad-leafed plants spread outward from their beds, their surfaces catching the warm overhead glow. This section feels less delicate than the nursery, more established, more sure of itself. You pause beside one tray where a stand of long grass has begun to lean slightly away from center. The imbalance is minor, but worth correcting. You set the lantern down and reach beneath the tray to the stabilizing arm. The adjustment dial turns smoothly beneath your fingers. The bed settles by the smallest degree. Above it, the grasses respond not all at once, but gradually their tips shifting back toward the strongest part of the light. You leave them there. The ring continues its slow, silent circuit around the station's core. Nothing in it announces movement loudly. It is only felt in the growing, in the way roots sit, in the way stems rise, in the way the whole section holds itself. You walk on. After a while, the grasses and broad leaves give way to another kind of sound. Water, not a rush, only a soft, continuous movement somewhere ahead. The path leads into a section where narrow irrigation channels run between the beds, guiding nutrient-rich water through the roots of the larger growing specimens. Some of the flow travels hidden beneath the trays. Some of it rises briefly into clear open channels where it can be observed before slipping back into the system again. You slow beside the first one and set the lantern on the walkway edge. Then you kneel. The water moves steadily through the channel, clear beneath the garden lamps. Tiny bubbles drift along its surface and gather briefly at the edges before moving on. Through the transparent section below, you can see the current pass onward beneath the beds where root systems wait in mesh cradles for its return. You reach toward the control valve beside the channel and turn it slightly. The effect is immediate, though gentle. The flow widens a little, smooths a little, settles into a more even passage through this section of the garden. You watch until the movement becomes consistent again. Above the channel, nearby leaves respond in their own slow way. Stems hold steady. Leaf faces incline toward the lamps. Roots below continue receiving what they need. A small adjustment, a changeless current, nothing forced, nothing abrupt. You close the valve panel and rise, lifting the lantern once more. The irrigation channels continue untroubled along the floor, carrying water through the living sections before returning it to the vault's filtration system. Ahead, beyond the next curve, the fuller warmth of the garden dome waits, the place where growth has moved beyond leaf and stem, and where flowering, pollination, and seed begin again. Farther ahead, the corridor widens once more. Through a curved glass partition, you can already see the larger space opening within the station. The living archive garden. Here the most mature plants are kept, not only to be observed, not only to be maintained, but to complete their cycles fully and produce the seeds that will eventually return to the sleeping chambers of the vault. You follow the irrigation channel a little farther as the path broadens. The lantern moves beside you, and its warm reflection travels briefly along the clear water before the current slips beneath the growing beds again and disappears from sight. Ahead, the chamber changes. The straight metal walls of the corridor fall away. In their place rises a curved glass boundary from floor to ceiling, and beyond it the dome waits in a deeper, quieter light. The plants inside are older, taller, more settled in themselves. Many have already passed through their first upward reach and now stand in the slower, fuller stage of growth where flowers open, pods form, and seeds begin their patient work of ripening. A control panel rests beside the door. You set the lantern on the ledge and place your hand against the glassy surface. The system recognizes the inspection cycle. A low tone sounds, the seal releases. The door slides open. Warm air moves outward to meet you. It carries the faint scent of leaves, damp soil, and something softer beneath it, blossom, perhaps, or the early sweetness of pollen in the lamplit dark. You lift the lantern again and step inside. The dome rises high above you in a wide, transparent arc. Beyond it, stars drift slowly across the dark, and farther still, the curve of the earth glows faintly beneath the station. Inside, the planting beds are broader than those in the nursery or irrigation sections, arranged in wide circles with winding paths between them. Some plants hold clusters of small flowers open beneath the lamps. Others carry seed pods already forming along their stems. The whole garden seems to breathe at a slower pace. You pause just inside the dome and allow that slower pace to reach you fully. It is not only the warmth, not only the scent of leaf and damp soil, not only the visible growth all around you. It is the way time feels here. In the preservation corridors, time was held still. In the nursery, time had only just begun to move. But here, in the living archive garden, time has lengthened into cycle. Flower after bud, pod after flower, seed after pod, nothing in the dome tries to rush ahead of itself. Nothing strains toward completion before it is ready. The whole chamber seems arranged around the permission to unfold little by little. If you wish, this is a good place to let your own breathing soften again. In and out. No effort, no performance, only rhythm. The glass above the dome carries the stars on one side and the faint curve of earth below. Beneath that double sky, the plants are held in warm lamplight, each one moving through the stage it has reached and no further. Some still hold themselves in leaf. Some are only just beginning to open. Some are heavy already with seed. Every bed is at a different point, and yet the dome feels whole because all those points belong to one process. There is a quiet comfort in that, too. Nothing here needs to be all at once. Not beginning and flowering and seeding at the same time. Not fresh and finished in one breath. Only true to its stage. The keeper knows that and moves accordingly. A nursery adjustment is different from a harvest. A harvest is different from pollination. Pollination is different from checking a sealed chamber in the cold halls behind you. Each task has its own pace, and this dome asks for perhaps the gentlest pace of all. Because here the work is not only to preserve what already exists, it is to accompany what is still becoming. You take another step into the garden. The path beneath your feet curves between wide beds whose edges are softened by leaf shadow. Light rests on petals, on smooth seed pods, on the slight sheen along darker leaves. Somewhere farther in the dome, circulation passes through a taller stand of stems and produces the faintest shifting sound, almost like the memory of outdoor growth translated into something quieter, more enclosed, more careful. The station has no wild wind, no insects moving from bloom to bloom, no sudden weather crossing the beds, and yet life goes on here. Not an imitation, but an adaptation. The brush replaces the insect. The lamps replace the longer sun. The circulation becomes a kinder form of breeze. The keeper's round becomes part of the ecology of the place. That thought settles lightly rather than heavily. You are not standing apart from the dome. You are one of its night conditions. A warm lantern passing the leaves, a hand that can shift pollen, a hand that can gather seed, a presence known to the beds not as disturbance but as continuity. Around you, the garden accepts that presence and remains itself. The petals stay open. The leaves keep their shapes. The branches continue to hold their pods. Only then do you begin along the first path in earnest, ready to move deeper among the mature beds where the careful work of flowering, and seed can continue beneath your care. A branch brushes softly against your sleeve as you pass the first bed. Broad leaves gather and release the light. Delicate stems hold themselves still in the warm, circulating air. The plants here are no longer beginning. They are continuing, completing, moving serenely toward the seeds the vault was built to keep. You follow the nearest path deeper into the dome. The garden grows quieter toward its center. The paths widen slightly there, curving between the largest beds. The air is warmer than in the corridors behind you, but never heavy. A circulation system moves it gently through the dome, enough to keep the plants healthy, enough to stir the leaves by the smallest measure, enough to make the whole chamber feel quietly alive. Near one of the larger beds, a tray of tools rests on a low stand. You set the lantern beside it. Before you, tall flowering stems rise from the soil, their pale petals open wide beneath the lamps. At the center of each bloom lies a small cluster of golden pollen. You reach for the soft pollination brush and hold it lightly between your fingers. This part of the work is always forgiving. In the station's controlled air, there is no wild breeze to move pollen from bloom to bloom, no insect crossing the bed, only the keeper's careful hand, continuing the cycle without disturbing the calm of it. You lean toward the first flower. The brush touches the center lightly, collecting a fine dusting of pollen. Then you move to the next bloom along the stem and let the pollen settle there. The petals tremble almost imperceptibly. Nothing more, you continue with the next flower and then another. A quiet sequence, a soft brush, a small transfer, the slow beginning of seed. When you finish, you return the brush to the tray. The blossoms remain open beneath the lamps, outwardly unchanged, yet already moved along by that brief, delicate touch. In time, they will fade. In time, small pods will take their place. In time, those pods will hold the next seeds for the archive. You lift the lantern and follow the path on through the dome. Farther in, the flowering beds give way to plants that have already gone beyond bloom. Their stems are thicker, their leaves broader or darker. Along their branches hang clusters of seed pods in various stages of formation. Some remain tightly closed. Some have begun to swell. Some show the faintest opening along a seam where the shell has started to loosen. You slow beside one of these plants and place the lantern on a nearby stand. It rises taller than the surrounding beds, its branches spreading beneath the high curve of the dome. Oval pods hang along them, pale green and lightly veined. You touch one gently. The shell feels firm, faintly warm from the lamps above. A label at the edge of the bed records its origin, a colony world with slightly warmer air and greater moisture than Earth, conditions the station has carefully recreated here. The plant has adapted well. Several pods are ready. From the tray beside the bed, you take a small sample container and hold it beneath one of the pods that has already split a little along its seam. Then, with the lightest pressure of your fingers, you ease it open. The pod parts with a faint snap. 3 small seeds fall neatly into the container. They are dark, smooth, and no larger than grains of rice. For a moment you look at them there in the bottom of the vessel, newly gathered and perfectly formed. Later they will be sealed, labeled, and passed back into the colder parts of the vault. But for now they remain here, between living plant and sleeping archive, held briefly in your care. You close the lid. The small click of the seal is soft in the warm air of the dome. Then you set the container back on the tray, lift the lantern once more, and continue along the winding path through the measured living heart of the floating seed vault. As you continue along the path, the center of the dome opens fully around you. The planting beds fall into a wider circle here, leaving a settled, open heart at the middle of the garden. Above, the curved glass reveals the slow passage of stars beyond the station. Far below, the earth turns through darkness, its oceans, and cloud bands faint beneath the night. Inside the dome, everything remains unhurried. Leaves move lightly in the circulating air. Pods rest along their stems. Flowers hold open beneath the lamps. Nothing needs to hurry toward becoming. The lantern's glow travels softly across the edges of the nearest beds, though here the garden lamps do most of the work. Their light falls evenly across the central plantings, warm enough for growth, considered enough for rest. This is the part of the vault made for patience. Here, plants are allowed to complete their whole cycle under careful watch. Stem, flower, pollen, pod, seed. You slow beside a bed where that final stage has already begun. The flowers here have faded. Their pale petals have long since loosened and fallen away. In their place, dry seed heads have formed along the stems, light and delicate, ready now for gathering. A small collection tray stands nearby. You set the lantern beside it and lean closer. One of the seed heads has opened enough for harvest. You hold a paper envelope beneath it and brush the head lightly with your fingers. Several seeds fall into the envelope with a soft tapping sound. They are tiny, almost weightless, small enough that on an open world, a single breath of wind might have lifted them and carried them farther across the ground than you could follow. Here, within the still warmth of the dome, they fall only a few inches into the keeper's waiting hand. You fold the top of the envelope and write the plant code along the edge in a quick, familiar hand. Later, these seeds will be transferred into their protective capsules and returned to the colder archive beyond the garden. But for now, they remain part of the living section of the vault, still closed to the bed that produced them. You remain there for a moment before moving on. Around you, the planting beds rise in different shapes and heights. Some species grow tall and slender, lifting their seed heads high beneath the dome. Others spread close to the soil, holding their pods beneath thicker leaves. Each bed carries a different history of climate, gravity, light, and adaptation. Yet here, beneath the curved glass and the careful cycle of lamps, they share the same resting purpose. You follow the circular path onward through the center. The air is warmer here than in the corridors behind you. A slow current moves through the dome, carrying the faint scent of leaves, blossoms, and damp soil. Near another bed, the flowers are still open, layered in pale petals around bright centers of pollen. A tray of tools rests beside them. You set the lantern down and reach once more for the pollination brush. It is light in your hand, soft at the tip, made for this exact work. You lean toward the first blossom. The brush touches the flower's center and gathers a fine dusting of pollen. Then you move to the next bloom and let that dust settle there. The petals shift slightly beneath the contact. Nothing more. You continue in the same way along the stem. One flower, then the next, a soft brush, a brief touch. The beginning of another seed. When you finish, you place the brush back on the tray. The blossoms remain open beneath the lamps, outwardly unchanged, yet already moved forward in their cycle. In time, their petals will fade. In time, pods will begin to form where the flowers are now. In time, those pods will dry and open, and another set of seeds will be ready for the keeper's hand. You lift the lantern and continue through the central beds. Here the plants are at different points in the same hushed pattern. Some are only just passing out of flower. Some hold fresh pods, green and sealed. Some have reached full maturity, their shells dry and faintly translucent beneath the warmth of the lamps. You stop beside one of those. A collection tray waits nearby. You place the lantern beside it and take one of the pods gently between your fingers. The seam has already loosened. With the lightest turn, it parts with a soft crack. Inside, small dark seeds rest in a neat row. You hold the pod above the tray and tip it slightly. The seeds fall one by one with a delicate tapping sound against the metal surface. You count them without needing to speak the number. Then from the tray, You take a waiting storage capsule and slide the seeds inside. The capsule closes with a soft click. Soon it will leave the warm air of the dome and return to the preservation halls. For now, it rests beside the empty pod, still within sight of the plant that made it. You set the pod back among the stems and lift the lantern again. The center of the dome remains composed around you. Leaves stir softly as the air passes through them. Lamps hold their consistent warmth above the beds. Beyond the curved glass, stars continue their silent drift. And far below, the earth turns faithfully through the dark, while the newest seeds of the archive begin their journey from living garden to long keeping. You continue along the circular path. Behind you, the center of the living archive garden settles back into its own untroubled rhythm. The pollinated flowers remain beneath the lamps. The gathered seeds rest in their envelopes and capsules. Leaves move softly in the air. Nothing in the dome feels interrupted by your passing, only tended. The path curves gradually toward the outer edge of the garden. As you move away from the central beds, the walkways narrow again. The lantern in your hand casts a soft pool of amber over the floor, though the overhead lamps are still enough to guide you. On either side, the plants grow younger once more. Here, the stems are thinner, the leaves smaller, the pods not yet formed. Droplets left by the irrigation cycle cling to the edges of the newest leaves. Some hold the light for a moment before slipping soundlessly back into the dark growing beds below. You walk slowly between them. There is no sharp boundary between one stage of growth and another in this dome, only gradual change. Seedling to stem, stem to flower, flower to pod, pod to seed. The whole garden arranged not by hurry, but by sequence. At the outer edge of the dome, the glass rises high above the beds. You pause there for a moment. Beyond the curved panels, space opens in every direction. The stars move in their slow drift. Far below, the earth turns through the night, cloud systems stretching across the oceans, distant coastlines marked by faint lines of light where cities still lie beneath darkness. The station travels steadily above it all, a quiet keeper of quiet things. After a time, you turn from the glass and follow the path toward a narrower maintenance passage that leads back into the deeper structure of the vault. The air begins to cool as soon as you leave the dome behind. Warmth falls away by degrees. The scent of blossom and damp soil thins. The hum of the station returns through the walls, low and unvarying, until it becomes once more the background sound of the night shift. The passage is smooth and pale beneath your feet, its curve leading away from the garden sections and toward the storage rings where newly gathered seeds begin the next part of their long rest. You walk on. This section of the station links the living gardens to the deeper archive. Circular corridors follow the structure of the ring, and along the walls, small observation panels give occasional views into the adjoining storage systems. Ahead, the passage opens into a broader chamber. The outer preservation ring begins here. Rows of storage racks stand in long arcs that follow the station's curve. Within them rest transport capsules, smooth sealed containers used to carry newly collected seeds from the warmth of the living garden into the colder protection of the archive beyond. You step to the nearest rack. Several capsules are already seated in their holding frames. Their surfaces catch the dim corridor light in muted reflections. You place your hand lightly against one of them. The casing is cool. The seal line remains tight and clean. Along the side, a small indicator glows steady, confirming that the interior conditions are holding exactly as they should. You move to the next frame and check its connection point. Everything sits properly aligned. No looseness, no variation, only stillness and readiness. Behind you, the warmer light of the garden dome has already begun to fade from view. Ahead, the station returns fully to the quieter language of storage, transfer, and long keeping. You continue along the arc of the preservation ring. The air here holds the familiar calm of the archive sections. Cooler again, less scented, more exact. The hum of the systems moves gently through the walls. Along the ring, some of the transport capsules have already been filled during earlier cycles. Others remain empty, waiting for the next gathering from the dome. At a wall console, you stop. You set the lantern on its edge and review the panel, temperature holding, pressure holding, circulation through the transport line holding. A row of green indicators confirms what the room already feels like: balance. Still, the manual check is part of the round. You touch the verification control. A soft sequence of light moves across the console as the nearby racks and capsules are scanned. One by one, the indicators complete their pass and return to dependable green. No correction is needed. You add the inspection time to the system log, then lift the lantern once more. Farther along the ring, narrow windows appear at intervals between the racks. Through one of them, you catch a brief glimpse of the stars slipping past beyond the hull. Through another, only darkness and the faint reflection of your lantern in the glass. Then the racks close in again, and the corridor resumes its gentle curve. You walk on through the passage. Behind you, the living archive garden remains in its warm dome of leaves and blossom. Ahead, the deeper preservation halls wait in their passive suspension, ready to receive the newest seeds of the vault. The preservation ring bends gradually toward a wider chamber, and as you follow the curve, the storage racks give way to a section built for movement rather than rest. This is where the transport pods are kept. The room follows the circular shape of the outer ring. Along its walls, docking frames hold small cylindrical pods designed to carry seed capsules deeper into the archive. Their shells are smooth and pale, built to keep their contents undisturbed as they travel through the station's internal transit lines. You slow beside the nearest frame. A pod rests securely within its cradle, its surface catching the soft corridor light. Along one side, a narrow status strip glows with a low-lit line of information. You place your hand against the casing. The metal feels cool and anchored. Inside are capsules gathered during earlier harvest cycles from the living archive garden, already sealed and waiting for transfer into the deeper preservation halls where they may remain untouched for generations. You glance along the indicator strip: pressure holding, temperature holding, transit lock engaged. Nothing needs adjusting. A brief internal hum passes through the pod as the station completes its own routine check. Then the silence settles again. At the next frame, the pod is still empty. You release the inspection hatch and look inside. Cushioned compartments line the interior, each shaped to hold a single capsule securely in place. Once filled, the pod will travel inward through the rail system, carrying its small sleeping cargo away from the warmth of the garden and into the colder hush of the archive. You close the hatch. Around you, the chamber remains settled and orderly. Filled pods, empty pods, cradles waiting, transfer without hurry. Preservation already in motion, even here. After a final look across the room, you step back into the corridor and continue on. The outer ring curves farther around the station. After a time, the racks begin to thin, and the passage narrows into a walkway running close to the outer hull. Along one side stretches a long viewing panel. You slow there. Beyond the glass lies open space. Far below, the earth turns steadily beneath the station. From this height, the movement is almost too slow to notice, yet the cloud bands do shift if you watch long enough. Pale weather drifts over dark water. Along one distant coastline, a thin scatter of city lights still glows where night has not yet given way to morning. You stand for a moment beside the glass. The vault circles the world that first gathered these seeds, from ancient fields, from forests, from early lunar colonies. from settlements farther out where new climates taught familiar plants how to begin again. All of them are held here now, a hushed store of futures. For a little while longer, you do not move away from the window. The station's outer hull frames the darkness cleanly, and beyond it the world below seems both immense and very far, close enough to watch and too distant to touch. That distance changes the way everything looks. Storm systems become patterns. Coastlines become lines of tone and shadow. Cities become faint constellations laid against the sleeping land. And yet nothing below is abstract, not really. Every line of coast contains weather. Every dark band of forest contains roots and water and soil. Every faint light along the edge of a continent marks lives still underway beneath the turning sky. The seeds in the vault carry that same hidden fullness. From here, they are small, dry, numbered, shelved, but each one contains a larger world folded inward. The possibility of stems lifting from soil, the possibility of leaves turning toward light, the possibility of fruit, grain, flower, shade, the possibility of whole habitats beginning again, one rooted thing at a time. Standing at the window, you can feel how naturally the station belongs between those two scales. The vast world below, the small sealed futures within. One does not diminish the other. Instead, they explain each other. The planet turns under cloud and darkness, carrying all the landscapes from which the collections first came. The station circles above, carrying their condensed continuance. It is not a grander life than the life below, only a true responsibility, a promise made in orbit. Keep what can be kept, guard what can be guarded, hold enough variety that beginning again remains possible. You rest your gaze on one band of cloud moving above a dark ocean. Even from here, its shape changes incrementally if you watch long enough. That slow alteration has its own sleep-like quality. Nothing fixed, yet nothing abrupt. A form becoming another form, so gradually that the eye can follow without strain. Your breathing can follow it too, slow enough to match the orbit, slow enough to match the clouds, slow enough to match the work of a station built around patience. There is no need to think ahead to the remaining route. The ring will continue when you turn away. The check still waiting will be waiting in the same untroubled state. Nothing in the vault becomes more secure through hurry. So you let the moment lengthen. The glass cool near your sleeve, the lantern warm in your hand, the stars fixed at one depth, the earth turning at another. The outer ring, for all its service panels and transport lines, has offered this brief widening of perspective. A reminder that every stored capsule belongs not only to a rack, a pod, a drawer, or a chamber, but to a sky, a climate, a ground, a place where one day something may grow again. Only after that thought settles do you leave the window and continue along the corridor. The viewing panel gives way once more to solid wall, and along it run a series of narrow service compartments housing the systems that keep the outer ring stable. You open one and check the filtration unit within. A fine screen has gathered a faint layer of dust from the circulating air. You slide it free, brush it clean, and return it to its frame. The compartment closes with a soft click. The corridor resumes its silence. Farther along, the passage widens slightly again, and the walls are fitted with access panels for the energy systems that feed the preservation chambers. Soft indicators glow across their surfaces. These lines draw from the station's solar collectors, storing enough power to carry the vault safely through the long orbital night. You release one latch and open the panel. Inside, compact regulators sit in neat rows, balancing the flow that keeps the chambers cold, the transport systems active, and the garden lamps steady. You check the display strip along the edge. Reserves are holding well. There is enough power for the remainder of the night cycle, and more besides. You close the panel and secure it. Then, from this section of the ring, a narrow service walkway leads outward toward a small observation alcove built along the station's outer curve. You follow it. At the end, another wide window opens onto the dark. Beyond the glass, the station's solar mirrors extend outward like long, silent wings. Though the station still travels through the night side of its orbit, the mirrors catch faint traces of starlight along their edges. Before long, they will turn again toward the sun and begin gathering light for another cycle of keeping. You remain there for a moment. The mirrors hold still. The stars drift leisurely. The station moves without sound. Your breathing stays easy. Then you turn back toward the corridor and continue through the quiet systems that support the floating seed vault. The passage grows quieter here. The hum of the energy systems fades behind you as the walkway leads into another section of the outer ring, one devoted to the station's environmental stabilizers. A line of narrow wall panels houses the instruments that keep air moving at the right pace through every part of the vault. You stop at the first. The latch releases with a soft click. Inside, a compact arrangement of ducts, sensors, and filters directs the station's slow circulation. Cooler air toward the preservation chambers, warmer currents through the garden domes, balanced flow along the connecting corridors. Nothing dramatic, only a hidden breathing that the whole vault depends upon. A fine filter screen sits within the frame. You slide it free and see the light dust gathered there during the long orbit. Using the small brush kept inside the compartment, you clear the screen with a few careful strokes, then return it to its place. The panel closes softly. Farther along, the remaining stabilizer panels glow with steady indicators. No further adjustment is needed. The vault continues its unseen work through ducts and vents behind the walls, moving air across sleeping capsules and through living leaves with the same measured calm. Then the corridor narrows again and begins to turn back toward the station's interior. You follow the curve. The outer systems fall gradually behind. The air grows cooler once more. Along the walls, rows of transfer racks come into view, each holding sealed capsules that have completed the first stage of stabilization after collection from the garden. Most rest in silence with their indicators glowing green. At one rack, a single light shows amber. You stop there. It is not a warning, only a signal that this capsule has finished its stabilization cycle and is ready for transfer into permanent storage. You touch the panel beside the frame. The display identifies the contents, seeds collected earlier in the night from one of the flowering beds in the dome. The capsule itself remains cool and still in its cradle. You add a brief note to the log, marking it for the next archive transfer cycle. Later in the orbit, when the automated rail line activates, it will move inward through the station and join the long sleep collections deeper in the vault. You continue on. The transfer racks follow the curve of the passage for a little while longer, then begin to fall away as the corridor opens into a broader hall. Here, the long-term storage gallery begins. Tall preservation chambers stand on both sides of the room, their glass faintly misted by the cool air. This is where the gathered seeds may remain for generations, untouched except for the resting care of the station around them. The sound is different here. Even the system seems softer, reduced to a low, distant murmur behind the walls. You walk at your own pace between the chambers. Within each one, thousands of sealed capsules rest on carefully balanced racks. Seeds from forests, farms, valley gardens, orbital habitats, and distant colony worlds lie in ordered rows behind the glass. You pause at one chamber and read the identification display. The list scrolls by degrees. Grain collections from early lunar settlements, forest seedlings from remote colony planets, flowering species gathered during later exploration missions beyond the nearer systems. Each record is brief, precise, yet each one holds the outline of a place where something once grew beneath a sky of its own. Near the far wall, a small observation console waits for the keeper's final check of this section. You rest a hand lightly against the panel and review the archive status. Temperature holding, humidity holding, all chambers secure. The entries need only a short confirmation. You add it, and the gallery returns to its silence. Beyond the hall, another corridor leads inward toward the station's central axis. You leave the storage gallery behind and follow that passage, narrower now, drawing you away from the outer preservation ring and deeper toward the hushed center of the floating seed vault. The air remains cool, and even as you move farther inward, behind the walls, the station continues its careful work. Coolant passes through the preservation chambers. Ventilation moves slowly from one section of the vault to the next. None of it draws attention to itself. It is simply there, balanced and continuous, holding the archive in the right conditions while the night shift nears its end. The corridor opens at last into a small junction where several passages meet. One route leads back toward the garden domes. Another returns toward the docking corridor where the round began. A third curves upward through the station toward the final stop of the inspection, the observation ring. You pause only long enough to confirm what is already clear. The preservation halls have been checked. The living beds have been tended. The newly gathered seeds have been secured for transfer. Only the upper ring remains. You follow the rising passage. The floor curves gradually beneath your steps as the corridor spirals toward the station's center. Along the walls, narrow windows begin to appear between the structural supports. Through them, the stars move by degrees across the dark. Far below, the Earth continues its patient turning. At the edge of the planet, the faintest suggestion of morning has begun to gather. You continue upward. The spiral opens at last into a wide circular chamber. This is the observation ring. A quiet walkway curves around the station's inner axis, enclosed by tall glass panels rising from floor to ceiling. When you step onto the ring, the whole structure seems to open beneath you. Below, the inner levels of the vault spread outward in even layers. The garden domes hold their low glow. Beyond them lie the preservation corridors and the long storage galleries where the seeds rest in sealed stillness. Farther out, the rings you have just walked continue around the station's broad frame. All of it moves in silence. You begin along the circular path. Beyond the glass, the earth fills much of the view. Oceans curve dark and deep beneath the last hours of night. Cloud systems drift over the continents, their upper edges beginning to gather the faintest trace of silver. From here, the world looks calm, unhurried, vast enough to hold every landscape from which the vault's collections first came. Fields, forests, valleys, riverbanks, settlement domes under other skies, all of them now reduced carefully and respectfully to seeds resting in ordered rows below your feet. You stop beside one of the tall windows. Along the horizon, a thin line of pale light is beginning to form. For a while, that is all it is, a narrow brightness at the edge of the planet. But as you continue unhurriedly along the ring, it gathers strength. Not suddenly, never suddenly from this height. The sunrise comes as a gradual widening, a sure release of light across the world below. Cloud tops catch it first. Pale gold touches their upper surfaces while the oceans remain dark beneath. Then the glow spreads farther. Contours begin to appear where there had only been shadow. Coastlines, ridges, the faint outline of mountain ranges, the suggestion of rivers turning silver under the first reach of morning. You rest a hand lightly on the railing and watch. Below, the vault continues everything you set in order during the night. The chambers hold their temperatures. The air moves through the domes. The newly gathered capsules wait in their frames. Nothing rushes simply because the light is returning. Along the outer structure of the station, the solar mirrors begin their slow turn. Even that movement is measured. They angle themselves toward the rising sun, and fresh energy begins to pass back into the system. Soon the station will cross fully into the day side of its orbit. Soon the garden domes will shift their light cycles. Soon the daytime rhythm will begin. But for now, the transition remains gentle. The ring is quiet. The stars are still visible overhead. The planet turns beneath the glass. And the last of the night lingers softly aboard the floating seed vault. The ring is wide enough to hold stillness without emptiness. Glass on one side, the soft curve of the railing on the other, the station beneath you, the planet beyond. There is room here for the round to settle before it closes. Morning has not fully claimed the world below. Night has not fully released it. For a little while, both remain present at once. Stars still visible above, gold beginning below, dark ocean holding its shape even as the cloud edges brighten. A continent not yet fully revealed, but no longer hidden. You have moved through cold halls and warmer domes, through sealed pause and living change. Now the station itself passes through a threshold of its own. If you like, let your breathing rest here with it, the inhale arriving quietly, the exhale leaving quietly. No need to deepen either one. Only notice how easily they continue when nothing asks to be solved. Below, the vault is carrying on exactly as it should. The seeds are not aware of dawn. They do not need to be. Their waiting is longer than a single night, longer than a single orbit, longer than the small passage of hours that shaped your round. Yet even so, this return of light belongs to them in another way. Because plants have always answered some version of light. Because everything stored below was once part of a cycle of day and season and growth. Perhaps that is why sunrise feels so fitting here. Not sentimental, not dramatic. Simply right, the first pale band widens a little more. A brighter edge appears along one cloud bank. A coastline becomes clearer. Then a darker inland shape behind it. Then another. The detail comes gradually enough that the mind can receive it without effort. And inside the station, detail has also been giving way to simplicity. The round began with many chambers and many small tasks. Now all of that resolves into a quieter understanding. The vault is holding. The gardens are holding. The new seeds are secured. The station is turning into light. Nothing more complicated is required. You stand at the glass while that understanding settles. The lantern by now feels less like a tool than a final ember of night, still warm in your hand while daylight gathers beyond the hull. Soon it will be set down. Soon the resting quarters will receive you. Soon other hands, other hours, other routines will take up the station's continuing day. But not yet. For now there is only this suspended interval. Between dark and gold, between work and rest, between the last checked chamber and the first full light over Earth. When you do finally turn from the window, the closing of the round will feel natural, because this pause has given it space to soften. Here in the observation ring, the moment remains quiet. You stand beside the glass and watch the sunrise continue its slow unfolding across the planet below. The seeds resting in the vault were once gathered from places touched by light like this. Fields warming under morning sun, forests beneath drifting cloud, gardens tended patiently by careful hands, riverbanks, hillsides, valleys after rain, all of them held now in another form within the chambers below. The light spreads farther. Night loosens its hold on the oceans first, then on the edges of continents, then on the cloud bands trailing over them. Nothing abrupt, only a widening brightness moving patiently across the world. At last you turn from the window, and follow the inner curve of the ring toward a small control station set into the wall. This is where the inspection cycle is closed. The desk is narrow, built to fit the line of the chamber. You set the lantern beside it and sit for a moment. At the movement of your hand, the display wakes and opens the night ledger. The summary appears in measured lines. Preservation chambers holding, outer rings functioning normally, garden dome stable, transport sequence ready. Every section of the vault has passed through the night in balance. You review the entries from the round. A cleared frost pane in the first corridor, a verified chamber in the deep archive, a slight irrigation adjustment in the nursery, a vine returned to its guide, pollination completed in the living garden, fresh seeds collected, sealed, and prepared for transfer. Short notes only, but together they form the shape of the whole shift. Other keepers have sat here before you, recording similar nights in the same steady way. The archive endures by such small continuities. You add the final note, inspection complete, all systems stable. The entry settles into the ledger. Beyond the glass, sunrise continues over the earth. You close the console and stand again. The station has crossed farther into morning now. Light has begun to gather along the inner passages, replacing the deeper darkness that held them earlier in the shift. Below the observation ring, the vault continues all that you set in order during the night. The preservation chambers keep their measured cold. Air moves lightly through the garden domes. The first changes of daytime cycle begin quietly within the systems. You leave the ring and follow the inner passage downward toward the main corridors. Soft daylight now filters through the viewing panels at intervals along the way. Not bright, only pale and clear, enough to silver the edges of the floor and touch the corridor walls with morning. The archive halls remain silent as you pass them once more. Behind their glass, thousands of seed capsules rest in careful order, unchanged by the hour, protected within their stable environments. Collected from farms, forests, and distant worlds. Held here so life may begin again wherever it is needed. Near the main vault entrance, you stop at the final control panel. The display scrolls through its last confirmation. Preservation temperature holding, atmospheric balance holding, transport capsules secure, garden domes active. Everything remains as it should be. You touch the panel once and the vault registers the completed cycle. The night inspection is finished.